Welcome back. In today's episode of Oxygen Not Included, I'm going to be experimenting with liquid-cooled farms. Alright, so I'll be covering 3 different comments in this video, but the first one here is from Ordon, who has a very simple idea as far as thermal cooling a room with liquid. So it's kind enough to provide me with some pictures right here. So you can see this is his tank of very cold liquid. So this is brought in from some cold biome, or maybe it's actually placed in a cold biome of some sort. However, it gets here, it's cold. And the idea is that he's using a liquid temperizer to bring that temperature up, and you can see the thermal switch right there, which is 21.2 degrees Celsius. Using insulated pipes up to a certain point, and then using, probably granite pipes, or I guess you could probably do wolframite since it is liquid pipes, to kind of thermally adjust this cell right here to make it the correct temperature. So that's very simple. So I'll go ahead and give this a try. Another good observation from Mr. Kaleidoscope Eyes right here says, if you use a hydrofan, it stops running at 18 to 20 degrees Celsius. So you can see this picture right there. So you can see this might be a very simple way to grow some mealwood if you don't have a cold source available. I guess one disadvantage though is if it is warming up from the outside atmospheres, you'd probably have to run that over and over again. So it may not be the most efficient way, but you can see it seems to be working in this picture. And the last element of this video comes from Repso right here, which is a challenge/tutorial, is how to produce enough food for my 50 duplicants, which is a direct tie-in to my last challenge right here, where I was doing the super duper duplicant challenge. And one of the elements of that challenge is to bring in 50 duplicants at cycle 100. So I'm going to have a lot of farms in order to make that happen. So I need a lot of food, and I need it to be very simple. So I'm going to use hydrofans to cool things down, and then I'm going to use the liquid cooling system to hopefully keep it at temperature. So let me go ahead and set this up, and we'll run an experiment. One observation that is worth noting is that polluted water has a lower freezing temperature point than just normal water right there. So you can see it's at negative 20.6 degrees Celsius is its freezing point, but water is negative 0.6 degrees Celsius. Alright, so one of the first things I'm going to need to do is calculate exactly how many plants I need to grow. 50 duplicants is 50,000 calories per cycle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my form over here, and then I'm going to calculate what the average amount of calories per cycle is. Now obviously this is an average number, so it's not something that you're always going to get. You only get that stuff when you actually harvest it. It's not an average number. You can't harvest every day. But you can see right here, you get 192 calories a day if you're only getting a standard yield out of meal lice. But if you're able to go good or better, you can get 384 calories a day. Now the bristle blossoms, if you're growing those in general, you're going to get 400. The key to survival though is to have at least a good yield on the bristle blossoms so that you can keep getting those seeds over and over again to continue to grow those plants. For the meal woods, you're going to have an excellent yield in order to get seeds out of them. Alright, so the number of plants I need is going to be 50,000 divided by that number right there. Okay, so the number of plants I need on average, if I'm only getting a standard yield, I'm going to need 260 mealwood plants. Are you kidding me? That is huge! Although if I'm getting a good or better yield, which I should be getting, I only need 130. That's a lot of plants. Bristle blossoms, 125. This is going to be a huge farm. Alright, so the trick here is going to be coming up with a simple design that I can make over and over again. Obviously because I need a crap ton of plants. Alright, so I'm going to use insulated tiles, but in this case, I'm going to go ahead and just use sedimentary rock instead of going all the way to the abyssalite, just because it's it should be more available, and considering the quantity I need. Now one of the tricks you guys showed me is that you can actually put planter boxes on top of your farm tiles. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and that's going to double the amount of food I can have in this one area. Alright, so you can kind of see the setup I'm going with right here. You can see I've got 2 gas vents. That's in case the pressure drops low enough, we can go ahead and turn on a pump to bring in some more pressure. And that's one of the things you want to make sure you have is at least enough atmospheric pressure. You don't want to drop below 750. So I made sure to have that in there. Also made sure to have a gas valve, as you guys have previously recommended, to keep this nice and low. That should keep the temperature variance that's coming out of these vents to be more minimal, because you're not trying to pump too much in there. So we just have a spot for a gas valve over there. Also a liquid valve, because what I'm going to be doing now is I'm going to be doing the routes. Now Orderin was talking about having the maximum exposure of those pipes into an area. So I thought the same sort of thing that applies to a gas valve should probably apply to the liquid valve as well. So the flow control, if you turn this down, the amount of liquid that's going to be spaced out inside those pipes is actually going to be less, so you should get more flow through those pipes as these plants are consuming it. That's the idea. So you should have a little bit more even temperature rather than getting, you know, a big chunk of 5 or 10 kilograms worth of water in a pipe and having that sit there for a very long time. So that's the thought process there. Key factor though, I'm going to be making this out of wolframite, and I'm also going to be trying to cover this as much as possible. Okay, so the other part of this farm is that I need a source of cold polluted water that I can warm up to just the right temperature. So looking over here in the cold biome, there's places where I have tons and tons of polluted ice that I can liquefy down and then kind of warm up and pump out. So that's what I have set over here. I have a little bit of a thermal switch set in this case to 21.3 degrees Celsius, and then I'll just pump that out. And that will go right in here. The other thing is I also have a liquid lock. So I'm gonna run to this liquid vent, fill up this area, and this one I'm gonna have at a little bit higher temperature. So the reason I put the tepidizer in there is so that when these duplicants go to run through there, they don't end up cold. At least that's the idea. Another interesting recommendation that you guys had was to fill this with like a heavy gas that they could walk through. But I can only do so much in one video, so I'm not going to be doing that. So one thing that might happen is that you actually pump in cold air. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and put in a couple of these lamps, little wolframite lamps, and then I'll hook those up to a thermal switch. So just in case we got some cold air coming in through these vents, we can warm it back up. Alright, so I have an atmospheric switch that I'm now using to turn a pump on to kind of increase the amount of oxygen I have in this space. You can see it's got some interesting things going on here. I'm not a real big fan of having a hydro fan inside of here, just because it consumes the duplicant's time, like, all day long. If you have a bubbles, that's all she's gonna do. She's just gonna run this fan all day. Alright, so the temperature inside of here was already kind of average, so I painted in some really hot oxygen, and we'll see what happens here when I turn this pump on. So let me go ahead and enable that. We're going to start pumping some water out. As you can see, the water inside of here is at 19.3 degrees Celsius or so. Every once in a while, some more stuff should actually melt and go on down there, but we'll see what happens. So if we look at the temperature, we can see just how quickly the oxygen is cooling down now. So there you have it. Within one cycle, it looks like everything's right down to the temperature that we really want it. Alright, so I'm going to start my experiment here for this first farm here at cycle 110. So over the next 13 cycles, I'm going to see just how much power, on average, this farm consumes. So that's with the idea that some more polluted water may be added over here every once in a while. So this might have to run. The pump is also going to have to run every now and then. And these lights may or may not come on and off. We'll see. Oops, I ran into a problem. This thermal switch cannot be there. So I'm going to get rid of that other hydro fan right there and move that thermal switch. Interesting. So it seems like even though these seem to be fighting each other, it looks like you can plant both of these. I don't know what's up with this poor duplicant. He's having all kinds of problems. Oh my gosh, this dude's sneezing, burping, vomiting. Horrible. See, every once in a while this light is coming on because some more oxygen or more gas is entering this system right here. It's not necessarily oxygen. I think that's kind of cool. That's a little fun little thing. Alright, so early expectations of these plants. It looks like I'm going to get a good yield out of these little planter boxes, and out of the tiles beneath them. If I can click on the mealwood itself. Looks like I'm predicting an excellent yield, 148.8. Wow. Somehow this is getting fertilized twice and irrigated twice. What's up with that? I think I broke the game. I think it's like stacking on top of itself. Well, how about that? A more than perfect yield. Although the useful thing we can see here is that it is completely fertilized, ideal pressure, ideal temperature, and it's irrigated all at the same time. Alright, so for my very first harvest off the planter boxes, I'm getting a standard yield. However, for the mealwood that's planted into the hydroponic farms, I'm getting a good yield. So what that means is I'm getting 12,000 calories out of these normal planter boxes, and then out of the hydroponic farms, I'm getting 24,000 calories. For a grand total of 36,000 calories for the first harvest. All right, so get this, on my second harvest, I'm actually getting excellent yield out of these hydroponic farms. So that means I'm getting seeds one cycle before I should be getting seeds. How about that? Some of these plants here in the middle are only getting standard yields. So 9 of these on the last cycle were standard yields. So all the others were good or excellent. Harold's eating my entire farm. Harold, well, he's gonna have a lot to eat. It's just going ham. Look at him. No. All right, so my test didn't go completely flawless. However, I do have some results thus far. On average, I was able to get about 3,700 calories per day. So that isn't huge. It would be nice to get that number a little bit higher. However, we did see that we were able to get some excellent yields, so I should be able to make a very large farm. Also, my average wattage that this base was using was up to 207 watts, with some days being much, much higher than others because I needed to heat up a lot more liquid over here. So this thing really causes the power to go up and down depending on what needs to happen. So to truly get a much more conclusive answer, I'm gonna need to take this test and run it again, but a little bit better this time. Alright, so I'm now on day 2 of this experiment. Unfortunately, that last one just didn't work out as well as I had hoped, so I'm gonna try to control the variables a little bit better this time and start over. Sometimes you gotta do that. So the other thing I'm gonna try to do this time is I'm gonna try to make one farm that gives me all the food I need. Alright, so each one of these lines is 18 long. So then I have 18 lines times 8, giving me a total of 144 planter boxes. That's a lot of farm. Alright, so if you exclude abyssalite from your insulated tiles, the next best options you have is obsidian, igneous rock, and sedimentary rock. Those are the best options because those all have a thermal conductivity of 2. Everything else has a higher thermal conductivity. So I'm going to keep using those. I'm just going to go with the sedimentary rock here and stick with that plan. Alright, so looking at my previous design here, I feel like this is actually pretty good. It seemed to do well. So I'm going to stick with the same sort of setup, but I'm just going to scale it up. Okay, so for this setup right here, since it is so big, I'm going to simplify the pipe runs a little bit. I'm not going to use as much this time. So I'll just kind of recreate this image right here and go with that. So I'll just have the one single line that goes up to the plant. We'll see how that works. Alright, one last thing I want to do is I'm going to dig this out and I'm actually going to make a nice tank over here that will be in this cold biome. So rather than try to melt ice and then have the power and all that stuff kind of fluctuate, I'm just going to get it set up correctly and then see what it costs to maintain that. This is one of those things where you do a synthetic test and it doesn't necessarily reflect everything you might see in game. There we go. So there's some space and it's nice and cold and these tiles will now cool down. Okay, it's worth mentioning that these liquid tepidizers here use a lot of power. Look at that, 960 watts. So it's worth keeping that in mind because you're probably going to want to protect that with its own power transformer. So that means this whole system here, it needs one to protect this tepidizer, one for the other one, and then one for everything else, for like the pumps and lights and all that stuff. Alright, so you can see right here I've used a power transformer and a battery just set up for this liquid tepidizer right there. And that's because my natural gas generator only puts out 800 watts, but this thing uses 960. So I gotta have a little bit stored in a battery in order to make sure that I'm not overdrawing the system. So that's the same sort of thing I have here. A couple of batteries that I'm gonna plug in. And then I'll also plug this into the liquid tepidizer. Woo! Not like that. There we go. Alright, so here we go. I'm plumbing this thing up. I got this pump. I'm gonna fill up this space right here. And then this thermal switch, I'm gonna bring that up to a fairly nice warm temperature of about 30 degrees Celsius. That's the hopes. Just to try to get some sort of idea of how much power is being consumed here, I'm just gonna run a little bit of an experiment to see how long it takes for this to warm up this size of a tank right there. So if I click on below at the start of the next day, I'll start to get some sort of numbers. Okay, a half day in, and I've gone up about 10 degrees Celsius in this space. However, I'm just about out of all the power I saved up here. And at that point, this thing will start flicking on and off a bunch. Yeah, see, it's on and off. That being said, it did about 20 degrees Celsius in a single day right there. And it used 88.7 kilojoules of power. It's not too bad. These liquid tepidizers are actually quite efficient as far as how much heat they put out as compared to how much power they use. Alright, so there we have it. Under 3 cycles, it was able to warm all of this polluted water up to a good acceptable temperature. Alright, so this water over here just does not want to warm up. It just wants to stay cold. So this thing here ends up flicking on and off and on and off constantly. One, because it doesn't have enough power to keep things running. But the other thing is that even when it does get up to temperature, this water keeps cooling down. It's like pulling in, like everything around it is really quite cold. So it just, the water is absorbing that heat and then cooling off. Or so to say, lack of heat, whatever. Alright, so I'm just about ready to set this up and run my experiment. So I've plugged in everything here. As we can see, I'm going to bring in a lot more oxygen to this space. Let's start to bring that pressure up. Try to get it up to 1 kilogram. The temperature of this polluted water seems to hold a little bit better. Actually, if you look at the details of polluted water, it's a little bit less thermally conductive than clean water. But it's also in an area where the temperature that is like naturally around here, the carbon dioxide and everything, it's all about the same temperature. So this thing does not turn on and off all that much. So how this gas pump is set up is that if any of these atmospheric switches is lower than 1,000, it will run the pump right here. So it's actually set up so any of these can turn that pump on. As far as decor goes, I don't think I'm winning any battles with this. It's just not very nice in here. And you know what? It seems like I just need to do this. So I'm gonna make some more lamps, but right here in the middle, just to try to even all that out. Alright, I tell you what, I'm gonna deconstruct that statue right there. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take a storage compactor right here, and I'm gonna fill this with fertilizer. That should allow the fertilization of all these plants here to be a little bit easier. Alright, so I set all of the heating lamps here to 21 degrees. Let's see how that works. I'm going to turn off my gas pump now, and I'm going to start the experiment here on cycle 166. By the end of this, I want to see how many calories I have for just meal lice. We'll see if I can quantify what I'm getting out of this farm based on that. So right around 178, 179, I should have a full harvest done. Alright, so let's see what I get for a result here. Looks like it's taken about half a day just to plant this first row right there. It'd probably be a smart idea to have some seeds over here, or maybe seeds in this spot, just to make that go a little bit faster. Oh well, things you learn. We'll see if we can get everything planted today though. So I wasn't able to get everything planted. Close, a little over half. 2 full cycles, still not able to get everything planted. It's such a huge farm. Oh, and everybody's being interrupted. I got a noisy sleeper down here. Go figure. There's so many variables in this game, it's like, it can be just a pain in the butt to try to control all of them, you know? So one thing that is happening here is I'm getting these duplicants that are, they consume air, so it has to pump in more oxygen into this space. Alright, so if I take a look at some of my mealwood plants here, I can see that I'm getting a predicted good yield. Right up there, another good yield down there. Some excellent yields, good yields. So, it looks like this farm is producing about the best results you can get. So that's awesome. What the heck? I've teleported you away. Stop beating up my crap, Marie. Get out of here. Oh, now that pump has to run. Arrgh. The fact that you have to use duplicants to run the synthetic test is a pain in the butt. So one good reason not to use the liquid lock right here is the sopping wet stress change right there. Plus 20% per cycle. So I tell you what, I'm gonna deconstruct that and just get rid of it. So for my first yield out of the planter boxes, I'm getting a standard yield, and then I'm getting a good yield out of the hydroponic ones. I need more duplicates. I need more than 3 to run this. You can see just how much meal lice I'm generating. Look at that, 960 some right now. It's huge. What happened down here? Who took this out? Oh, come on. Okay. And now my liquid pump stuff over here has decided to explode off the screen. Just... okay. So having the buildup of carbon dioxide down here is causing a bit of a problem. So the oxygen, despite potentially being high enough volume, the oxygen's really dropped down because people are breathing it out. It seems like this would be better served as just a container for a bunch of carbon dioxide. So maybe the offshoot of a natural gas generator or something like that. However, then all your duplicants would have to hold their breath, and that wouldn't be very effective. So maybe I just open this airlock down here. I don't know. Having giant farms has its own problems. Alright, so at the end of cycle 179, I can see I'm up to 3,568 meal lice thus far, but it looks like there's still some things yet to harvest. The real question is it going to go bad by the time I can start harvesting stuff? Yeah, like a whole bunch of food has decayed. So while I am getting more food, some food is decaying because I don't have enough people to eat it. And I'm not using refrigerators because that would suck up a ton of power, and I wanted to try to get some sort of reading of how much power this is. I don't know. This sort of experiment, it's proven to be quite a bigger challenge. So unfortunately, my results of trying to do a synthetic test for 50 duplicants worth of food right there has just so many different variables that's going on right now that it's just making it impossible to get a truly synthetic test out of this thing. So, while I would have liked this experiment to be, you know, real cut and dry and efficient that way, unfortunately it doesn't seem like that's gonna happen. That being said, there's some stuff that we have learned from this experiment. The most important being that you can actually stack the planter boxes on top of the hydroponic farms right there. And that gives some sort of buggy extra yield to your plants that you're actually going to be growing there. So that's pretty cool. The other thing I would take away from this experiment right here is that trying to scale up on your farm and take up a very large volume seems to multiply the challenges that it takes to run this farm. So having a more cellular design like we saw down here to begin with is something that's a lot easier to manage. Alright, so for my last takeaway on this, let's talk about liquid cooling this farm. One obvious thing is that when you have this many plants, it consumes a ton of polluted water. So in order to have enough of that polluted water, that you're going to need a lot. And trying to control the temperature of that much water is going to take quite a bit of power. Not to mention this adds a fair bit of complexity with power transformers and batteries and having enough power to just power everything in general. I'm not 100% sold on just using liquid to thermally control, you know, the temperature of your farm. Not that it shouldn't be an element and that you should, if you have really cold water, use a liquid temperature to increase that temperature. I just don't think that that's a one single shot deal. And somehow I'm getting overheating damage over here. What? Okay, so now apparently, oh. So this thermal switch is now in a cold environment, so it's constantly on. So that switch would need to be down here, hence overheating damage. Go figure, right? What a pain in the butt. Okay, so even though the numbers were not extremely accurate, there was a little bit of that right in the middle. This still averaged out to 189 kilojoules a day. In watts terms, that's 315 watts to run a farm that is big enough to feed 50 duplicants right there. This is a really big farm. I think there might be ways to do it more efficiently. At any rate, you gotta end a video at some point, and I'm about 5 hours worth of recording into this one right now, and unfortunately, it just didn't work out as well as I would have liked. That being said, if you have different recommendations for easy farms to set them up, go ahead and leave them down there in the comment section below. I would like to revisit this because there are definitely gonna be those bases that need to have very large farms. And having simple blueprint-like systems to grow both mealwood and different plants as well, that's definitely going to be something that is needed, and needed on a large scale. So if you're trying to do a base that has 50 duplicants, you know, what does it take? If you found this video somewhat informative or helpful, you can go ahead and let me know down there in the comment section below. And if you also have other recommendations, you can leave them down there. And by the way, thank you guys so much for all your support recently. It's been absolutely awesome. If I've earned your subscription, then thank you so much for that. Hopefully I'll see you again next time. Stay awesome, guys. Peace. Brothgar out.